Imagine. Beneath the barren lands of Patagonia lies the secret of creatures that once ruled the earth for millions of years. We've been taught they're extinct, thus buried in time. But what if that's not entirely true? In this story, you'll follow Daira, a young scientist who accidentally opens the door to a long-buried truth. A discovery that not only shakes the scientific world, but also reveals that survival doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes survival means disappearing. Prepare yourself for a story filled with mystery, hidden clues, and creatures that are still watching us. If you have any theories, questions, or particularly chilling passages, leave them in the comments. I'd love to know, do you think they really left? In a hidden valley in Patagonia, a young paleontologist named Daira removed layers of dust from a rock unlike any other. Her hands trembled as she discovered a dagger-sharp claw protruding from a crevice in the rock. The summer sun burned her back, but Daira remained unmoved. She knew this was no ordinary fossil. It was a day that would change her life. Around her, the expedition team stared in silence at their find. There was something unusual about the bone structure. It was too slender for a Tyrannosaurus, but too large for a velociraptor. Daira called it Specimen 31, a nearly complete skeleton, buried in a running position. As night fell and the tents were lit by gas lamps, Daira sat alone with her field notes. She opened the leather-bound journal belonging to her father, also a paleontologist who had mysteriously disappeared in the same area 20 years earlier. Inside, there was a sketch of a fossil with a shape remarkably similar to her discovery today. Her father's handwriting read, "This creature is not extinct. It is evolving." The next morning, with the morning mist still shrouding the rocky slopes, Daira and her team began digging deeper. They found teeth, skulls, and vertebrae, all indicative of a new species. But that wasn't the most surprising thing. Near the main fossil, there was a footprint. Not just one, but 3 parallel lines, as if more than one creature lived together. Daira began to wonder, was this a group-living species? How did they survive in such a chaotic prehistoric time? Even more astonishing, in one of the rock layers, they found the remains of a tropical plant that shouldn't grow in such a cold region. Something had happened millions of years ago. Major change. But how did these creatures survive? Meanwhile, deep in the ruins of an abandoned laboratory to the north, a computer screen lit up on its own. Data from a chip found at the excavation site began connecting to a satellite network. Someone was monitoring Daira's discovery. And she wasn't working alone. That night, the Patagonian wind blew hard, battering the expedition tents as if reminding them that this land still held many secrets. Daira sat in front of her laptop screen, blinking softly, trying to read the scan results of a strange metal flake she had found among the fossilized bones. The flake wasn't stone, nor was it ordinary metal. It was black, shaped like a thin shard with microgrooves. When scanned, a binary data pattern emerged. A string of numbers that seemed to form a message. Daira rubbed her eyes in disbelief. Was it possible? A chip embedded in the ground, dating back millions of years. She turned on the re-encryption device, an ancient piece of technology her father had left her that could read the electromagnetic signatures of solid objects. As the device activated, a buzzing sound was heard, then a flash of blue light shot from the chip to the screen. The first word appeared. A single word in ancient Latin. Exilium. Daira searched for its meaning. Exil. Instantly the main tent lost power. All the lights went out. The team panicked, the generator making a strangled sound. But Daira remained seated, transfixed by the screen. An image began to appear. Not a photograph. More like a diagram of a creature. A central creature surrounded by smaller circles. Daira's eyes widened. The diagram resembled a social system. This species of dinosaur didn't just live in groups. They each had their own roles. Leader, observer, protector. Suddenly the tent door shook violently. Daira stood. Footsteps sounded outside. Not human. Too heavy. Too steady. Something was moving in the darkness. Meanwhile, in an old laboratory to the north, two men in black uniforms stood staring at a large screen. Their faces were tense. In the center of the screen, data from the same chip began to appear. A blurry image of a yellow-eyed dinosaur walking across a barren landscape filled with exotic plants. In the background, there was a flash of light like a protective field. The recorded voice was soft but clear. Not a creature's voice, but a human voice. Survival system activated. This species is evolving. The head of the secret security team turned to his colleague. If Dyra manages to activate the full chip, she'll know. And when she does, we'll lose control. At the excavation camp, Dyra's tent lit up again. The screen displayed a single coordinate. In the middle of the ocean, near a small island not listed on any map. And underground not far from the main fossil. Something began to stir. Dyra stared at the coordinates without blinking. A small island in the middle of the ocean, shrouded in satellite fog, nameless and undocumented. She knew the answer to all these mysteries lay not in a laboratory, not in fossils, but in that place. 3 days later, she was aboard a small helicopter, cutting through the blue sky with a manual map on her lap and a mysterious chip in her bag. The hired pilot had been silent since the start of the flight. He only uttered one sentence as they approached the target zone. The people who go there don't come back. Fog began to cover the windshield. The compass spun wildly. The helicopter shook. The sound of the engines muffled as if swallowed by air. But soon the fog parted, and below them appeared a circular island, surrounded by high cliffs, as if protected by nature itself. As soon as she landed, Dyra immediately felt something different. The ground beneath her feet was warm. The air was humid. Giant trees towered like they belonged to the Jurassic period. Strange birds with scale-like feathers flitted overhead. She walked slowly into the forest. There he found a path. Not a natural path, but an old stone-paved road, nearly swallowed by tree roots. It led to a massive structure, covered in moss and vines. It looked like a temple, but the architecture wasn't made by modern humans. Inside, a rumbling sound could be heard. The echoes of his footsteps repeatedly bounced off the stone walls. He inserted a chip into the device he'd brought. The screen lit up. A hologram projection filled the room. A voice emerged. But not human. If you hear this, then you are part of the next cycle. We are not extinct. We hide. We survive. We learn. Suddenly the ground shook. The temple walls began to shift. From the gap, a giant creature emerged, long-necked, with gleaming scales and calculating eyes. But the creature didn't attack. It stared at Dyra, then slowly lowered its head. The voice in the hologram continued. We studied destruction. We avoided war. We chose exile. Our descendants hid. And now you stand on the brink of the same choice. Outside the temple, the sky suddenly darkened. Unidentified military vessels began circling the island in the distance. Satellite signals began to be disrupted. They hadn't come to research. They'd come to erase. Dyra looked at the creature once more. She knew the truth wasn't meant to be spread, but to be protected. She took the chip from her device and crushed it on the ground. The world wasn't ready to learn that dinosaurs weren't extinct. They were simply wiser than us. And they chose to survive. In ways we'll never understand.